welcome to another edition of the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show. Where this week we're very pleased to have another outstanding offensive line coach, Mr. Colby Rosen, on the show. Coach has a variety of experience at multiple stops, and we're going to talk some run game, some O-line plays, some drilling, different things like that, all sorts of subjects we will dive into here today. But before we get into that, I want to take just a moment to remind everybody that the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show is brought to you by School Funder. School Funder, the only online fundraising company in America that lets you keep all of the money your team raises. Just getting ready to start our summer fundraiser. We've always done very well with School Funder. Coaches all across the country give away 20% of their proceeds in fundraising when they don't have to. Contact the good people at School Funder at schoolfundr.org and let them know the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show sent you, as it'll help the show. While you are helping the show, please right now hit subscribe. It's not going to get you any spam. It's not going to get you any emails. Anything from me, all it's going to do is give you notifications when we come out with a new episode, which is typically on Wednesdays. As we're breaking into the season 2, real quick ad for anybody that wants to be on the show. I know coaches, as the season will get going here, will not have time to do this type of stuff. So our plan through the season is to have little 5-10 minute episodes on anything that you could get in as a scheme, as a wrinkle. Could be a blitz, could be a run scheme adjustment, could be a lot of different things, but anything that you think you could get in a 5-minute period, and that'll be our kind of our episodes through the season. And then when the off season hits, we'll get going with some longer episodes and things like that as well. So like I said, Coach, excited to have you on. I've seen a lot of your posts on Twitter, a lot of good stuff. I always love talking to O-line guys. Always a wealth of information, and it's such a unique position to coach. I'm going into my 27th year. Most of a lot of those as a head coach, but most of those I've had the O-line. Even as a head coach, I've kept it because it's the most important piece of the puzzle, I would say. A lot of people, we've talked to a lot of head coaches, and they always say their top hires, O-line coach, DB coach in that conversation as well, because things can go awry very quickly with both the O-line and the DBs if you don't have the right guy there. But anyhow, always like hearing about guys' football stories. One of the things we talk about on the show frequently, a lot of people have discussed there's a bit of a teacher shortage in our country, but there's also a young coaches shortage. So we're trying to get as much information out there to coaches as humanly possible, and we want to be a resource for all those young coaches out there. So, but before we start, tell me a little bit about your football story.
So, my football story. So, right now I'm the O-line coach at Kilgore High School, which is in Northeast Texas. That is, I'm an alma mater. That's where I graduated from in 2009. So, out of high school, I played at Kilgore, obviously, and went and played football at Missouri Southern. It's in Joplin, Missouri. It's Division II and MIAA in there with Central Missouri, Northwest Missouri. It's, one of the top 2 Division II conferences in the nation. But so did that, and once I got out of school, I knew I wanted to coach. That's really all I'd ever done was football, and I really didn't have a plan B other than I wanted to see if I could play after college, but there's really not a big calling for 6-foot center in the NFL. So, that ship had kind of sailed. So knew I wanted to get into coaching. So got into coaching, and got my first job. I was coaching in Grand Prairie, Texas, which is a suburb of Dallas. From Grand Prairie, I went to down to the Houston area into New Caney at the Porter High School. Spent 2 years there, and then one day just was looking on THSCA job board and saw that Kilgore High School O-line job was open. And so I messaged my buddy he's the OC at Kilgore, TJ Gillenhall. I messaged him, and he said, yeah, apply for it and we'll hire you. So I sent the athletic director my information, and 30 minutes later had a phone call, had an interview the next day, and got the job. So I spent the next 6 years at Kilgore as assistant O-line coach with Mike Wood was the original head coach that hired me, and then Clint Fuller came from Pleasant Grove. He's still the head coach at Kilgore. Just got hired back on there about a month ago or so. But Fuller took over and spent, like I said, 6 years at Kilgore, and then from Kilgore, kind of title chasing, went for a coordinator role at Blue Ridge High School, which is a suburb of Dallas. It's a 3A. It's up by McKinney and Anna. So I spent a year there and took over a 2-9 program, and we went 10-3 the season I was there, and kind of had a pretty good playoff run. And but knew I wanted to get back to East Texas, so interviewed a couple spots and had a couple opportunities back in East Texas, and ultimately ended up going with Spring Hill High School here in Longview. And I got here probably last May. Stayed here this school year, and some things moved around and some guys retired, and got the opportunity to go back to Kilgore for a second stint. And, there was no question, that was, if that came open, I wanted it. And, really didn't even have to interview or anything, just, word of mouth. Hey, this has opened up. You want it? Yeah, sign me up. So, we've been 10 toes down with the Kilgore thing, going back home with Clint Fuller and TJ Gillenhall and those guys that are still on staff there. And, it's a great program. It's got a special place in my heart because that's, I played there. That's where I learned, football and the right way to do things. And, there's a direct correlation in the success that they have at Kilgore, playing for the last 2 state championships the past 2 years, and how that matches up with how things are ran there. It's a tight ship, and things are going to be done the right way. So, I have a lot of respect for the program itself, the coaching staff, and, I'm excited for the opportunity to get a chance to go back, for a second time and win some football games. So, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Love hearing that stuff, Coach. Let me ask you, do you prefer being a coordinator or an O-line coach? Just out of curiosity.
It's fun being the trigger man on Friday nights calling the plays, but in doing that, it kind of takes away from your time you get to spend just being an O-line guy. And, having coached both ends of the spectrum, being an O-line coach and an offensive coordinator, there's pros and cons, definitely. But, it's hard to beat just being an O-line coach, having, if you work for a good offensive coordinator, if get the run game coordinator tag, and, you can just kind of hyper-focus on that, nucleus of guys and not have to worry about, everything else as far as personnel and formations, receivers, backfield, quarterbacks, all that, and just focus on the guys up front. I think that's ultimately, that's what I love, doing. That's, I'm an O-line guy to the core. You strip my layers and I'm an O-line guy. That's, I'm perfectly fine with, just being a career O-line coach. If the coordinator thing comes around again, that'd be great. I've done it, did a good job at it. But, that would have to come with, I would have a heavy say in offensive line and offensive line play. So, to answer your question, I don't know. Kind of depends on the system you're in. But if there was no O-line tied with it, I wouldn't want to do it.
I understand that completely. My best years as a head coach, even when I was calling the O-line, is when I had a coordinator that was kind of handling that aspect of it, and I could focus on the offensive line as much as humanly possible while trying to do all the head coach fun stuff as well. But anyhow, we've had a lot of guys from different parts of the country on the show. It's one of the parts I enjoy most. Tell us a little bit about, we always hear about Texas high school football. Had a number of guys from Texas on. Asked this question to all of them. What do you think is different about Texas high school football?
Man, it's a business. It's especially in the area that I'm at in Northeast Texas. You get into the Kilgore, Carthage, Longview, Gilmer, all up in here, and it's big business. That's what, communities shut down for on Friday nights during the fall, and kids grow up, playing Pop Warner, coming up through Little League and junior high, and then in the high school ranks, and wherever your feet are planted at, that's the program you want to play for. And people in the community take a lot of pride in the local high school's football program. Hold on, Pumpkin. And it's not just an extracurricular. It's people build their identity based on the success or level of talent, or other end of the spectrum, the lack of success their local high school football program has, and so it's cutthroat. It's a different culture than a lot of places, and that's one thing that makes being a high school football coach in the state of Texas so appealing is, it's a big deal. A lot of places, like I said earlier, I played college football in Missouri, so I played with a lot of guys from Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas. And they got wrestling and this and that, and it's not near as big of a deal in those states as it is in Texas. So it's like I said, it's cutthroat. You better produce on Friday nights or wherever you're at. You're not going to be there for very long. At least if you're at a program that it has success and has been historically successful, and I've been lucky enough to coach at programs that have sustained success over a long period of time. And, the head coach I work for now, Clint Fuller, in his first 4 years at Kilgore, he hit the 50 win mark. You better win on Friday night or you're not going to be where you're at for very long. So that's kind of the addicting part of it is, the success you have or don't have is a direct reflection on what you put in, the other 6 days of the week, and Friday night's just kind of your showcase of what you do throughout the week. And that makes the winning that much more fun. So, and like I said, that's kind of what drew me to it was, not necessarily a high pressure environment, but it's, how good you are is going to be a direct reflection of what you put into it. So I think that's, part of the reason why I love it so much. And, then the guys I get to do it with are outstanding guys. I've learned a lot from them. So that's kind of my take on Texas high school football. Really, kind of long story short, is the community involvement, especially in these smaller communities. And having coached in Houston and Dallas, and it's not the same in metropolitan areas. There's your Katy high schools and Allens that, kind of run the show up in those big major areas. But you get off in Piney Woods and, small towns in East Texas, and it's the high school football is definitely a way of life, and guys on staffs in those towns and communities are kind of seen as local celebrities. So it's a cool deal, man. It's definitely different than other areas of the United States.
Well, my wife teaches second grade, and I always tell her, if the kids don't do well on a quiz, it's probably not going to be on the front page of the paper. So that's a plus there in that regard. But moving on, Coach, what would you say? Would you consider yourself a gap scheme guy or a zone scheme guy or both?
If you held a gun to my head and told me to pick one, I'd be a gap scheme guy. I love GH counter, GT counter, counter bash, power. I like getting in heavy personnels and running power. We did a lot of that when I played, and I've been lucky enough to be in systems where we've done a lot of that as a coach, and I think that's just kind of where I've cut my teeth. Now, don't get me wrong, I love inside zone and ISO and everything else about run schemes, but gap scheme is probably my favorite. That and RPO and off of it is better than a zone RPO, just because you get that linebacker, that second level movement, and can open windows up. And but I love coaching counter. I love coaching power. I like blocking with angles and getting double teams on guys, and that's working kickouts and wipes, and that's just it's a lot of fun. It kind of zone stuff gets a little repetitive, but gap scheme stuff I love, especially the front side of counter. I could do that 20 hours a day and sleep the other 4, and I'd be just fine.
Love it, Coach. That's I would tend to be a more gap scheme guy myself. But let me ask you this next one. I have fun asking O-line coaches this one because, and I think a lot of it depends on, what level we're talking about. If we're talking about a big school that's 2 platoon or a smaller school where they're practicing both sides of the ball is a big factor on this. But what do you think is the sweet spot with how many schemes an offensive line, the average offensive line, or maybe above average offensive line at the high school level can execute well?
I'm a big proponent on less is more. I think, uh, you can get way overcomplicated very easily, thinking you have the right answer into, every little look the defense is going to give you, every little, line stunt, pressure, whatever. But I think if you get 3 or 4, schemes that your kids believe in, you live and die in, and just dress them with different shifts and motions and personnels, and I think that's the name of the game. You look at the historically good programs across the state and shoot even across the United States. They have an identity on offense, and that's what they're going to do. Whether that be if they're pin pull, inside zone, counter, power, whatever that is. If you can do what you do really, really well, then, there's whatever the defense does isn't going to matter. If my guys can go out and, you know, not bust plays and, all 5 up front or 6, however many you're going to play with are on the same page and playing fast and not thinking, that's where you want to get. And so again, my opinion, if we carried gap scheme and inside zone, in some variation of wide zone or outside zone, and that's all we did, and just dressed it a million different ways with pre-snap movement and different personnel groupings. That's I would be fine with that. I think you can do a lot, and schools have done a lot just being, real vanilla in what they do, just doing it really, really, really well. It's better to have less and do the less really well than, have 5 million different schemes and do them mediocre. There's a reason why high dollar car companies don't have 75 different models of cars, is because they don't have to. Uh, you know, find what you're good at, get your kids to believe in it, take the thinking out of it, play fast and be confident in it, and you'll go put some gold balls in the trophy case.
Well, Coach, you're walking me through. You're breaking down stuff. Obviously, a lot of work goes into getting ready for Friday night. But what do you think, as an offensive line guy, is the data or the tendency stuff that you're going to be looking at the most? There are certain things that kind of jump off the page to me, both as a play caller and as an offensive line guy. But when you're watching the film, breaking down the opponent, getting ready for that week, what do you think is the data you value the most?
I mean, that kind of goes back into, especially nowadays with technology and all the stuff you can do on Huddle and AI, you can get real nitpicky and start splitting too many hairs and look too far into it. Obviously, my first one is, defensive structure. What do they base out of? 4 down, odd front, stack, bear, whatever that is. Figure out what their base defense is, and do they jump around into different fronts? If so, figure out what those are, and then just really, other than looking for girls, hey, Brindley, hush. Other than looking at personnel on the defense, who the GoDaddies are, what are their tendencies? How do they play against, this personnel, this personnel? Where they bring pressures from? Are they field, boundary? Is it down and distance? Hash, whatever that is. First down, second down, third and short. Pick up their run defense tendencies. Passing situations, pick up pressures, and do they run line stunts? Do they stunt to or away from the back? Just your typical, huddle report you can run. Uh, I don't get too kicked in the ass with, running way too many analytics. I think that can get tedious very quickly. that kind of just goes back into my belief of, do your kids believe in what you're doing? Yes. Are they playing fast? Yes. Then, if you've got built-in answers, it really doesn't matter what the defense does. You get your guys playing confident and playing fast and not thinking, you know, you can throw the kitchen sink at us and 9 times out of 10 it'll work. That leaves the 1 time out of 10 it doesn't. But that's, you can't sit there and beat your head against the wall and be perfect 100% of the time.
Well, I tend to agree with that. Definitely some good stuff and some wisdom in there. Got to be ready for what they're doing. I'm not asking you to give away any trade secrets, but what are some things defenses do that have given you trouble and things you've had to have answers for as an offensive line guy?
The one thing that I've found in coaching offensive line that I've had to spend the most amount of time on, this time expensive wise, is twist pickup and pass protection. If that's whether it's on the bot, your man side, or passing off twist and slide. Slide's a lot easier. If someone's going to run line games, I would much rather it be to the slide part of the protection. But especially in man protection, just passing off twist. If they involve second level guys, different pressures, simulated pressures, or they, mugging backers, dropping out, twisting, crossing face. It's just, that's always, for me, has been expensive in time, figuring out, all right, we're going to see a lot of movement on Friday night in passing situations. We've got to figure out answers to pick it up. Just making sure the kids are on the same page with one another, and because that can get you beat, obviously, really quick. Is you start getting guys on different levels, and eyes are one way and the other one's eyes are the other way, and they miss a penetrator or a looper and don't communicate it, and that can turn into a nightmare quickly. And on that same note, zoning off twists in run game, that's, I think, one reason why I like gap scheme runs is, as you've got a gap, you don't have necessarily a man or a zone. Like if there's nothing there, climb. If something's there, go block it. So that kind of hides you a little bit with stunts and twisting up front and pressures. But, man protection in zone schemes is, having post-snap movement out of the defense is kind of I wouldn't say my bugaboo, because we've had success, figuring it out and dealing with it, but it's just, something that keeps me up at night. So, it's just one of those things, you figure out a way to handle it and that works for you, which, I've luckily been taught and I've figured out for myself being an O-line coach. And, I've stuck with those different drills and nomenclature and, passing stuff off, communicating. So, it's not as big of a deal now in year 12 as it was in, the first 2-3 years. But, that's probably the toughest thing, in my opinion, that you're going to deal with is just post-snap movement out of them. And obviously, if they've got a 4 or 5 star kid over there that's a GoDaddy, and you've got, little Larry up here, 5'9", 190-pound kid playing guard that's got to go up against him, figuring out how to handle that. But that's a whole different shooting match. But yeah, I'd just say post-snap stuff out of the box players.
Coach, if you had your bearings and you got to pick the most important, as a center, I think maybe you lean this way, but I've asked guys this question before. What do you think, and it could be scheme dependent, but what do you think is if you had your pick, who would be your best offensive lineman? Your left tackle, left guard, center, right guard, right tackle? Where would you go?
My personal preference, I'm always going to err on the side of the center, because I was a center. I think, that's obviously as your quarterback up front, he's got not necessarily your bell cow of the 5, but he's got to be a dude, got to be able to communicate, got to, kind of right the ship and make sure everybody's on the same page. So, from a physical standpoint, yes, I would like him to be, a 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", at 280 plus. But I would rather have a smart kid there that's quick, that's got quick feet and quick hands that can talk, than a big old kid in there just a big jug butt taking up space. I think as far as the best athlete up front, in my opinion, uh, kind of depends on if your quarterback's right or left-handed, but whichever tackle is on your blind side of your quarterback, I think he's, for the most part, it's left tackles. You can't have a donkey there. That's a spot you better, CYA if you're the quarterback, cover your ass and have a guy that's you ain't got to worry about your backside. When you're back in the pocket. So I think athlete wise is that backside tackle to the quarterback, and then guards. A lot of people flip them. Quick side, strong side. I want your true quote unquote road grader kids at guards. If you get one and then have a quicker kid at the other one, you can flip them around and put the big kid on the front side of gap runs and the quicker kid is your puller. But definitely kind of your mauler kid or kids at those two guard spots. But I think you can build an offensive line around a good center. If you get a kid up there that knows what he's doing, isn't afraid to talk and, tell people what to do and kind of run the show, if you got all five of them, hell, if they're screwing up and they're all five screwing up the same way, it's going to find a way of working out. So, I think mental wise, center is probably the most important spot. From a physical attribute standpoint, is that backside tackle of the quarterback or one or both of your guards. Being an O-line guy, I don't think any one position is more important than the other one. But, you got to KYP, you got to know your personnel, put kids in the best positions possible to be successful and, just kind of find what fits your kids that you got and put the puzzle pieces together, however that is.
Coach, I agree with you that your scheme's got to be flexible and you got to have a small number of things that you can execute against everything. In complete agreement there. But let me ask you this. Are there certain schemes you like against different fronts? I'll give you an example. For myself, I prefer running to a three-man surface against an odd front. I prefer running to a two-man surface against an even front. Are there things that you like versus different fronts?
I mean, this kind of goes back into the gap scheme stuff. Anything that can give us a numbers advantage on the call side, I'm for. If that means, running zone to a tight end or, running gap scheme, into a lighter box, whatever that is, if I can add hats to the point of attack, I'm all for it. I'd say gap scheme is you're more covered into any look you're going to get, just because you have more of a possibility of having combos up front versus a zone scheme. Like if you sit like a bear front, so if you get double four eyes, zero, two overhangs walked up, you can gap that off a whole lot easier, and you can zone it off because you're soloing guys up and. A lot of times, especially at the high school level, defensive linemen are going to be a lot better athletes than your offensive linemen. And I know majority of the time I don't like soloing a kid up on a two eye that's 290 pounds and runs a 4.7. I'd rather get two hats on him and get double teams at the point of attack and know I'm going to get movement or at least stalemated, not just put on skates and put in the backfield. But, really just kind of depends on what you're looking for. Anything that could, like I said, give you a numbers advantage in the box, I'm for it. And a lot of times that's gap scheme. So I think, again, if I had to pick one or the other, I'd live and die in counter and power. Or even, dart, duo, whatever gap run you want to call, I'd go with those.
Coach, you talked about it a little bit at times. Obviously, there's times you have the big road graders. There's times you have the 190-pound guard that's a tough kid that works his tail off in the weight room. Give me some techniques maybe you're teaching your undersized offensive line that are giving them a shot against some of those big boys in East Texas.
My biggest thing, and I've been taught this throughout my playing career and coaching career, is if you have great feet, disciplined landmarks, and good hands, and can play with leverage, it doesn't matter how big or small you are. I mean, trying to think what year it was. We had a kid that started at tackle for us he was a 3-year starter, and he was, I think at the end of his senior year, he might have been 185 pounds soaking wet, but he got All-State as a senior. We won 12 or 13 playoff games with him in his varsity career, won 3 district championships, and he had 3 different backs that, were All-State, broke rushing records, but he was 5'9", 5'10", 180 pounds, but he was great with understanding landmarks for his hat, getting his hands in the right place, had great feet, would out quick guys, and he was a technician at the technical side of playing offensive line, and when you're a smaller guy, you've got to be good at those things, especially at this level, or you don't stand a chance. You don't have to get 5-6 yards of vertical movement on a guy by yourself to be an effective offensive lineman in high school. If you can play with great pad level, landmarks, and technique, and just beat people to a point, you can get yourself in positions to be successful. And that split second of daylight, whatever you're running, that's if you got a back that knows what he's doing, that's really all you need. And that's how this kid was, and even in pass protection, he went against some dudes. Carthage had a run there for 2-3 years where they had 6'4", 6'5", Division I, 3-4-star kids playing rush ends, and I don't think he gave up a sack. He just knew how to his cushion between him and the rusher, and he wouldn't pull the trigger too quick on throwing his jab, and he knew how to catch with that backside hand, and he was a wizard at the technical side of it. So, and I mean, some of the like that kid, and they're better than my 6'4", 6'5" kids that I've had throughout my career that can just lean on guys and get the job done. So. I forgot what the original question was, but I got on my soapbox about technique and landmarks, but I think if you can master your trade as far as what you do on any given play, pass protection, run, whatever that may be, and you can hone in and learn to play with angles and leverage and timing and pad level, you can be as good as you want to be. And I think those are the guys that really separate themselves, or you get the big kids that can figure that out too, and that's your guys that go on to Division I schools and make careers out of it, is the guys that are naturally gifted, freak athletes and technicians. That's kind of my theory on all that.
Coach, last question. We certainly appreciate your time. I've enjoyed this quite a bit here. It's kind of a two-parter here, and you talked about your gap scheme stuff. Are you a gap down backer or a gap down double team, A? And then B, your time, obviously your drill time during the week. What would you say is the top drill, the thing you're kind of spending the most time on? Is it combos? Is it back blocks? Whatever. But are you gap down backer or gap down double? And what's the drill you think is occupying most of your time during a given week?
I'm kind of a mixture of gap down backer, gap down double. If I talk in terms of my priority gap. So if I'm on the front side of counter, my priority gap's backs. If I'm playing right guard and we're running counter to the right, my priority gap's A. If A is open, I'm going to look to play side. And if I'm covered, I'm going to build my combo with the play side adjacent uncovered, and that's kind of how we rule everything. And then, once we fit a combo, we've got to have 4 eyes out, knowing who we're working to, if he scrapes or plug, backfills, who's coming off. And, but I want to get combos on the front side, as much as possible, whether that be a tackle coming down on a 2-eye that's playing into the guard that he's on. We're not going to pass color to get color. I want to try to get 2 hats on downs and get first level movement and then handle second level once we get there. But, I think the what I enjoy working the most is combos. I love working combo fits. I'll pre-fit guys. I think combos are your time-wise your most expensive just because you've got to build that relationship with the guys you play next to on, knowing his timing on, taking his steps and fitting the down, getting hip to hip, getting, staying in it, not getting out of it too quick. That's the best offensive lines that I've been associated with have been guys that have played together, obviously 2, 3 years, 4 years in college, and they can, fit a combo with the guy they play next to in their sleep. And, base blocks are great, but that's kind of one of those things you're either good at or you're not. Some guys have it, some don't. But you got to rep the piss out of combos just because you can't leave any gray area in between the hips. A couple of years ago, I got into high leg combo and stuff like on a Crowther sled, which I love. If I had one piece of equipment I could pick and have nothing else, it'd be a Crowther. But uh, just fitting the gain, gather, gain, fitting on 1, 2, 3, getting those hips together, punching the hip, fitting the inside hand, getting eyes the correct spots, getting, your uncovered guy front sides eyes where he needs to be, getting the covered guy that's got help coming from the front side with him. Just the chemistry involved in correctly fitting a combo, that's one of those things that you need to a lot of time to if you want to get good at it. Now, you can, kind of half-ass do it and not drill it enough and it'll show up. But, just consistently fitting good combos is going to take time, which luckily for me, that's my favorite thing to work is getting 600 pounds on 300 pounds and just rolling someone off the line of scrimmage because, just banging heads. That's, I like getting under the chute and working combo fits and, just kind of to developing that attitude up front, But
Coach, when you're teaching your combos, let me ask you. I said I was the last question, but I kind of want to get into some of the details real quick. Are you? I haven't had a lot of luck with the gallop. Are you letting them turn their shoulders? Are you staying square the whole time and rotating, or how do you go about doing that?
if I gallop, so say we're running counter and I'm working my front side guard with the center on a head up nose and we're working to the -1 backer from the ID, if that backer knows what he's doing, he's going to scrape over the top. So that guard's got to stay square as much as possible so he can collect when that guy scrapes across the top of the play. If that guard gets his hips turned at 45 degrees and that guy plays him over the top and beats him, he can't redirect and get his hips back square. So I tell mine, we're gain, gather, gain. So I'm stepping inside foot, play side foot, inside foot, and I'm down shoulder blow delivery on the near, like gut, near pec, and we're blocking on the rise, and I'm fitting that play side hand, and I'm punching his hip pocket. So I tell mine, if that guy had a bag of chips in his pocket next to you, go smash the chips and stay square. So we're trying to bang the hip and get him displaced in backside A gap and then climb vertical to collect that backer scraping over the top. So, you know, my biggest coaching point is square hips. If you can keep your shoulders and hips square and go fit hip to hip with the guy you're comboing with and punch that guy's hip and displace him to backside A gap and then climb your track and stay vertical, you're good. Because, college, you can kind of get away with it because those guys are better athletes. But you get a high school kid, if he gets his hips on a track and the guy he's working to plays him over the top, he isn't going to be able to retrace and get his hips back square and be successful on that block. So, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I know football, if you cut out the middleman and not have to retrace their hips, hell, just keep their hips square the whole time. It's the same thing if you're running inside zone into a 5-man box into an odd front, and you're truly zoning the box. So mine will make a mo call, which is man over. So backside tackle is either going to lock or zone sift for the backside overhang. Backside guard's going to high leg combo with the center to the 20 backer over him. And then same thing, front side guard, front side tackle. They're working 2 hats for 2 hats. And now, we'll control the overhangs with, RPOs or whatever that is, quarterback read. But if we've got 5 hats for 5 hats, however you want to block it, we're high leg combo and staying vertical and coming off second level.
Well, Coach, I certainly appreciate your time and really got a lot of knowledge there, and I wish you the best of luck this upcoming season and throughout your career. So thank you so much for joining us, and we appreciate your time.
Sounds good, Coach. Appreciate you having me.
Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time. Another edition,
Yep.
Blue and Gold Gridiron Show.